China has now completely banned the personal ownership of digital currencies like Bitcoin. It is expanding its previous bans on trading and mining cryptocurrencies. This move aims to tighten financial control and accelerate the rollout of the state-backed digital yuan, the Western CBDC. What on earth is going on here again? The next big Bitcoin ban is popping up here in China, and we're seeing reports about it everywhere. Let me tell you one thing right away. There are quite a few things going seriously wrong behind the scenes here. Some things here are really inconsistent, and we need to take a closer look at them. We also know that, historically, Bitcoin bans have often led to price crashes, and that's going to make things very interesting now. But before we take a look at that, go ahead and smash the like button below for higher Bitcoin prices, for new all-time highs. You can't ban Bitcoin. You can't ban languages either. Bitcoin is simply information. It's just like trying to ban fire in the protocol here, or, I don't know, trying to ban the internet, the English language, the German language. It's just nonsense to try to ban Bitcoin, but still, countries keep doing it, and it always leads to massive price fluctuations. And right now, we're seeing another wave where basically one banned post after another is coming out. Take a look. If you just type China Bitcoin into X, you'll see banned here, China warning, banned here. Then it goes on here, every time China banned Bitcoin. They've done this several times already, 2013, 14, 17, 21, 21, 21, 25. That means, in 21, there were 3 separate Bitcoin bans. Here, China is now banning it for good. Here's another China ban, even from really big accounts. And the crazy thing is, not even Grok gets what's going on here. Grok adds a community note here and says, yeah, that's not true, this news, because Bitcoin was already banned here in 2021. But if we look really closely, and it's made very clear here what's going on, we see that old reports, for example from Reuters in 2021, are being used here, which are now popping up again. And what's happening here is purely a propaganda scare agenda, and we've seen this time and again in the past with quantum computers, with terrorists, and with other things. We keep seeing the same patterns, that panic is being spread here to push the Bitcoin price down. I don't know where all of this is coming from, or who's behind it. One person copies from another, and so on, but we keep seeing these waves of panic, where it's simply said, okay, now the Bitcoin ban is coming, now this is happening, now that's happening, now something else is happening. We don't have any official statements from the Chinese government here. That's really important. It's just some journalists or random people on the internet or something like that who are spreading this. That's basically the important point I wanted to share with you here. Just because things are often posted on the internet or spread somewhere doesn't necessarily mean that everything is always reported accurately. If we take a look here, we can see that China has restricted or banned cryptocurrencies about 18 times since 2009, according to detailed timelines from sources like Crypto News and Coinbase. With the most recent announcements from 2025, it could even be 19 times. Nevertheless, the Bitcoin network remains robust and global. The problem is that we don't have any official statements here, and when there are no official statements, there's always speculation and people just throw all sorts of things out there. And that's also what is often reported, that big players, for example, run smear campaigns. XRP, for instance, did something like that. They ran smear campaigns against Bitcoin. Then, from time to time, rumors pop up that, for example, some Wall Street players are trying to push down the price of Bitcoin, maybe even BlackRock or someone like that. But of course, these are all pure conspiracy theories, that they are deliberately running smear campaigns here. And we often see, for example, when the price of Bitcoin drops, when it crashes, suddenly all these articles come out, quantum computers, then here come the stories about criminals, environmental polluters. Bitcoin uses as much energy as this or that country. It's always the same things over and over again. And then, time and again, there's the story about the hard drive, that someone lost all their Bitcoin. But when the price of Bitcoin goes up, there isn't nearly as much reporting. That means we actually have a negative bias in the media here. So, when there's bad news, and we've just had another little drop, a little bounce down where Bitcoin slumps, then the media immediately jump on it and say things like, oh, Bitcoin is going to be banned, and so on. But when we're at all-time highs, we don't really see any intense reporting. So, the media still prefer to bash Bitcoin rather than support it, and you shouldn't let that drive you crazy. This is your big opportunity, because a lot of people do let themselves get worked up about it. That's why I'm going to make a video about this soon. So you should also share this video and hit the subscribe button below, for Bitcoin, for freedom, for peace, and for the awesome Bitcoin sausage tongs right here. But there are also a few official, let's say, insights. For example, I reported just 2 or 3 days ago that Hong Kong has now officially announced that they want to open up to Bitcoin and crypto. Feel free to check out the video from back then, from 2 or 3 days ago. In that video, I also talked about this interview with official politicians who are now discussing the Bitcoin move. And we already had statements from an ETF issuer, as I reported back then, who said that Kila is actively looking into shifting towards Bitcoin and crypto, basically opening up, because, of course, there's a behind-the-scenes battle going on. That means, it's China versus the USA. Donald Trump also seems to sense what's happening here, since he keeps talking about China. He keeps saying, we definitely have to overtake China. They can't be the first ones to bet on Bitcoin, crypto, and so on. And on the other hand, I can imagine that it's the same way in China. They also know, hey, the USA is the frontrunner here and we have to make sure we can somehow stand up to the USA, keep up with them at least a little. What was also pretty wild here is that in Lugano, there's a Bitcoin statue. That actually fits quite well now, since we're already talking about bans and so on. And now, someone has actually stolen the Bitcoin statue. And that's a really, really expensive statue. It's also pretty intense. There's one like it in El Zonte, where I always am in El Salvador. And now a second photo has surfaced here. Here you can see Christine Lagarde together with this Bitcoin statue, which was removed down here. We can see it here as well. Here's the pedestal, and here, no pedestal anymore. Christine Lagarde is just chilling here next to this Bitcoin figure, or between, next to this Bitcoin statue. Of course, the whole thing could just be a coincidence. Feel free to write in the comments below if you think Christine Lagarde might have actually swiped this statue. No, of course, that was just a joke. I think this is just an AI-edited image here, but it's definitely a cool meme, you have to admit. Christine Lagarde might not have stolen the Bitcoin statue, but at least she's stealing your purchasing power here, always taking away your time, yeah, your life energy. I posted it earlier too. Hey, dear bank customers, your account balance doesn't actually belong to you. One push of a button and you're switched off. Just ask people in Canada or critics of the system here in Germany. Only Bitcoin is censorship-resistant money. You just need to know this. At the bank, you have an entry, a bank entry somewhere on a central ledger or something like that. And if the bank is doing well and the bank says, okay, hey, you're cool, then it's your money. Or rather, you have a claim to the money, and you can exercise that claim. But if they're not in the mood, they'll just say, no, you only have a claim here, but we're not interested in dealing with you. You're not allowed to withdraw now. What's also really, really interesting, if that's actually the case and the money in the bank doesn't belong to you, then the debts at the bank don't belong to you either. A lot of people commented on that too. I found that pretty funny, because it's actually true. Well, not 100%, it's not quite that simple. You shouldn't take this completely literally, but generally speaking, it's actually smarter to have debts at the bank than to have savings, because if the debts are gone, well, okay, PFF, it's not that big of a deal. But if your money at the bank is gone, then that's a much bigger problem. And I can actually give you an example of that. Wow, that must have been ages ago. I once took out a loan from Sberbank. That was a Russian bank, and back then, there was the Ukraine conflict, and then Russia was excluded from the SWIFT system. And it was a loan, and when you take one out, it was a consumer loan, they automatically deduct the payments. Every month, the loan installment is debited. And then suddenly, it didn't work anymore, they couldn't debit it anymore. And then I got an email, hey, we've been excluded from the SWIFT system or something like that. And then, for about 8 or 9 months, the loan payments just weren't debited anymore. And that's exactly what I mean. Of course, you guys got the money, but then basically the claim was extinguished. Or not really extinguished, but the claim on the debt was kind of gone for a while. They couldn't debit the money anymore, so I basically had free money. Naturally, I went all in on Bitcoin, YOLO style. That trade actually worked out pretty well, of course. So, for example, if you go into debt, it might even be smart sometimes to do it with banks that are already on the verge of going under, although that's not entirely true either, because in my case, the bank was taken over by an Austrian bank, and eventually the loan payments started getting debited again. But you did have a liquidity advantage, you got a deferral effect. And just to be clear, this is absolutely not a recommendation, not at all, to take out a loan and buy Bitcoin or anything like that. I mean, I don't even have any Bitcoin anyway, I lost it all in that unfortunate pool accident. Just have to mention that as well. And taking out a loan is always a complicated thing, but let me tell you one thing. The dark figure here is pretty high when it comes to people actually buying Bitcoin on credit. But like I said, you really have to be the right kind of person for that. You also shouldn't overdo it, don't use too much leverage and so on. And that's also the crazy thing about the treasury companies, because if you have a loan, you always have certain problems. Sometimes you have margin loans that can get liquidated, or you might not be able to service your loans anymore. And that's the crazy thing Michael Saylor is building here. He's basically getting perpetual, never-ending loans that he doesn't even have to pay back, where he only has to pay out some dividends, and in effect, he's creating an infinite money catch. That means institutional players can play this game, that the money in the bank doesn't really belong to you, on an even crazier level. The comments here are always really interesting, especially when you post something like this. You can also see here that people have no clue about Bitcoin. For example, here's a comment from someone named Michael H. With Bitcoin, all you own are empty database entries, and if Bitcoin gets hacked again, those might be gone too. And of course, Germany, the USA, none of them are rule of law countries. Oh, right, yeah, sure. That's the thing here, empty database entries, and if Bitcoin gets hacked again, they're gone too. First of all, Bitcoin has never been hacked. There was a minor glitch back in 2012 or 2011 or so, when the blockchain was briefly paused, updated, and then things continued. Since then, it's basically had 100% uptime. Where else do you get that? Not with the SWIFT system, not with FedWire, nor with any other fiat money systems. And the thing about empty database entries isn't true either, because here it's a decentralized, distributed data storage. That's exactly what's so crazy about it. In the current banking system, the data storage is centralized. With Bitcoin, we have a decentralized ledger where all the balances are basically recorded. There's also a cool site for that, mempool.space. There you can always see the current Bitcoin blocks coming in. For example, here you can see block 908384. Then comes block 908385, and in every block, Bitcoin transactions are always included. If you were to click on one of these Bitcoin blocks, for example, let's try clicking on it. Now it's not loading for some reason. Yeah, whatever. You guys should definitely check out the homepage here. Then you can basically see how the Bitcoin network works, how the blocks come in. Some blocks are fuller, some aren't as full. For example, here you can see there were 2,200 transactions, here 2,900 transactions, and so on. Here you can see which pool found the block, and pool, monopool. Oh yeah, look, and here you can even see all the transactions, the history. That's important too. Bitcoin isn't anonymous, it's pseudonymous. Here you can see all the transactions. For example, here someone sent Bitcoin worth $9,180. Here someone sent 9,000. Yeah, that's the same transaction. Here, someone sent Bitcoin worth 197,000 US dollars. Check this out, for 40.2 sats per VByte. So definitely don't let anyone panic you, and if you still want to buy Bitcoin, I'll put a link down here to the Bitcoin Hotel. Here you can buy Bitcoin easily, safely, and simply. With the code BitcoinHotel, you can get up to 20% off the fees when buying Bitcoin. Guys, see you soon. See you then.